Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Late Night Table Talk. My name's Eric Yurko. I'm going to be your host, and it's approaching midnight in New Delhi, so we should probably get started. Joining me tonight is Travis Hill, rules editor, designer, and publisher. Going to get to hear more about what he's doing, what he's looking forward to. But before we get there are, as always, a few things I want to talk to you about. So, we are approaching our pretty much middle of season 1. We've been doing a few episodes now. You can tell it's the winter because I've changed into sweaters to show that time has passed. And I just want to thank you all again for watching, subscribing, being a part of this. If you're enjoying the episodes, let me know. If you know of people that you want to see me interview, me talk with, leave a comment, shoot me a message. We'll see what we can do. Well, it may be a short monologue today because I really only got a life update, which is that this may be the last time you see what I'm going to loosely call this set or the backdrop that I've currently got for these videos, because I'm planning on moving soon, and that will hopefully change this up and allow me to have a space that is more standard board game video-y. You know the drill, sort of big shelf, board games behind you, gives you that air of authority, or at least shows that you do own more board games than this pile of board games that I've had up for a month or two. And I'm looking forward to that. This makes me more curious than anything else, so I'd really love to know what, if you all were building your ideal game room or office, what would you have in it? What would you not want to miss out on? So let me know in the comments. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. I'll give you a couple highlights of what I'm thinking about, and then we can move on to the interesting part of the show, which is talking to Travis. So one thing that I'm really enthusiastic about is just sort of having a space for my desk that isn't in the same room that I sleep in. So getting that work-life balance properly divided is going to be big for me. I'd also really like a spot for my photography. So right now, the current layout of this room is complicated. That's the exit door, which you can see is now blocked, so can't leave. We're currently at my work desk. There is a sleeping area over that way, and then a photography area kind of over there, and that's sort of how we've demarcated this room into sections. It makes it hard to do other stuff, which is unfortunate, but it's sort of the nature of things. So kind of excited about being able to split those two ideas up and have a separate bed space and a separate workspace. Really looking forward to that. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear what ideas you all have for that kind of space, if you could redo yours again. And I'm looking forward to being able to show you what the new space looks like on subsequent episodes. So let's bring in our guest tonight, Travis Hill. Travis has been around and back again in the board game industry, often as a rules editor for games, and then as a designer in his own right, with such titles as Chainmail, Reunification, The Portal at Hill House, Our Innermost Thoughts, and now Cube Rails, which was on Kickstarter in January. Personally, I've had a lot of great times hanging with Travis at various board game conventions. He is an all-around class act of a dude. Really excited to have him on the show, so please join me in welcoming Travis Hill to Late Night Table Talk. Hey, Travis. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. How's it going?
Oh, Eric, is going great. Thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not doing too bad. Just, living the dream of putting up a wall of enough games that you have now sealed yourself in your room. Classic stuff. Every time I record, I'm always like, this is going to be the time that I don't do this and I can leave. But it has a nice sense of keeping you focused, you know what I mean? Because I literally
Sure.
can't do anything else. Because I'm just like, I'm trapped. But no, beyond that, pretty good. Just playing games, doing some writing, getting through the tail end of the year, starting the next one.
Yes.
That's the dream. Yeah. So what have you been up to lately?
I am currently on winter break from education. So I work in a public high school in Texas, and I have 2 wonderful weeks off for winter, which is not really winter in Texas either.
Right.
I mean, it's cold today. It's like 42 and raining. It's been like severely raining all day today. So that's kind of nice. It makes it cozy, right? And so My wife and I are very reluctant to actually get out of the house, which, I mean, we can't anyways. Well, maybe we can a little more in Texas than in California, but we choose not to because we are responsible adults here in the Hill household.
Yeah, California, we are very close to just having like signs posted in everyone's yard with just like the governor's angry face on it, being like, "You can leave your house, but should you?"
Should you?
And to be fair, no. So
No.
I leave for groceries, and I've been doing a few house tours because we're looking at moving places, and that's basically it. So
Yep.
only the essentials over here, which has been what it is.
What it is, yeah. We desperately try to on winter breaks. Because my wife also works in education, right? So we're actually working at the same school. So it's nice. Same, it is. So she is. So I'm the academic advisor. So I help kids with college and their advanced classes, AP classes, GT, stuff like that. And she is the librarian. But we are at opposite ends of the building. We're at a really large school out here. There are 2,600 students at our high school, and we're on literal opposite ends of the building. So it is 0.2 miles from my office to hers. And so we work at the same place, and it's very kind of in passing of like, hey, we see each other occasionally, but that's really about it.
Well, that really is a ships in the night situation. Yeah.
It is. It's been nice though this year because we've been able to carpool whenever we're going into work. Normally because I have a lot of weird scheduling stuff because I'm doing like financial aid nights and college events and stuff like that. And she has like book clubs and things like that. There's a lot of just kind of like our schedules would never line up. But this year, because of just reasons, I guess, we're not doing anything after school. So it's like we show up at the same time, we leave at the same time. It's been a good little shift here. So, but all that to say, during winter break we try not to go anywhere. Like we'll go do a couple fun things. We might do like some housework and clean up and rearrange and stuff. But really, that's it. Like we're watching TV and reading books and stuff like that.
That's fair. I mean, that's all you can really ask for with a break. I've been doing more video games, and that's been nice. I like was into video games very early in my life, and then I wanted to do more like social stuff, so I got more into board gaming, and then that became challenging. So now we are back on the video game train, and so that's been rewarding.
Yep.
But yeah, the question I usually ask people, I hate being asked this question for reasons that may or may not be obvious, but it's my show, so I can ask it. So let me reformulate it a bit. So what's Travis playing?
I am so sorry. All of your audio just totally got
that's fine.
Up right there. So that's weird. So let's try that again.
Yeah, we'll try it again. Okay, so let's see here. I don't love being asked this question, but it's my show, so I can ask it. What's Travis playing?
This has been kind of a really sad moment because I haven't been playing a lot. I used to play a lot. I mean, right? And it's the irony. Here's the irony of this entire situation. So for people who don't know, for 6 years, I co-hosted a podcast called Low Player Count, where we talked exclusively about 1- and 2-player board games. We kind of shut up shop right about a year before quarantine happened. So February of last year, 2019. And this would have been an ideal time to really be doing that show and to do it well. But because I spent 6 years, and you understand this, because I spent 6 years exclusively doing 1- and 2-player stuff, I just kind of got burnt out. I got burnt out from doing that. So I made this transition, and then quarantine happened. And so there's not a lot of playing of anything. Obviously not in person. In person play would be amazing. I think I've played maybe 10 games in person since March, and I think 7 of them have been solo. I think 3 of them have been like with my wife. We played like Time Stories a couple of times, and we played The Quiet Year, right? And so that's really kind of been about it for us over here. But I've been doing a lot of online gaming. I've been doing a lot of tabletop simulator stuff. And really most of it, this is silly, I got in pretty early in quarantine with a group that I found on Twitter who they had a Discord server set up that all they were doing was playing train games. They're playing Cube Rails titles like Chicago Express, Paris Connection, stuff like that, Northern Pacific, Irish Gauge, those big ones. They were playing those, and they're playing like every single Monday. And I'm like, these are going to be my people during this break. So really all I've been playing has been a lot of train games online, almost every Monday, since I think it was probably like the end of June whenever I hopped in there. So so lately it's been train games, either stuff that I'm working on that I'm play testing, or just stuff that other people want to do. You know, I have not 18xx. I'm not in that rabbit hole, because I really kind of have to be in front of stuff for that to work out and me to feel good and comfortable. Longer games online have been a real struggle for me. So, but yeah, a lot of train games really.
That's kind of interesting. I've actually experienced sort of the opposite. I've been playing games that are a little bit longer because basically no matter what game I play, I'm going to be extremely tired after I play it. Like playing online just wears me out.
Sure.
And so I'm like normally I'd be like, okay, let's play like, a couple 15-minute games. Like I used to play with my coworker in person, and we would sort of play maybe like 3 to 5 games an evening because we could just bust out a 10-minute game and just go at it.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, I could really only play one game before I get tired. So if it's a 3-hour game, I at least get my like money's worth out of the fatigue that I get afterwards. If I play a 10-minute game and then I'm exhausted afterwards, I feel terrible about it because I'm just like, one round of Santorini has put me like straight to sleep. Which is
it's true
right now.
It is. It is, yeah.
Yeah, no, I just played Gods Love Dinosaurs yesterday. That was a fun time, although our play of it was deeply cursed. So my personal computer's been having some issues. So basically it'll crash whenever I do anything, which is it is technically a diagnosable problem. I am unable to diagnose it. So I'm working on that right now. Pretty sure it's either a motherboard issue or a power supply issue, both of which are not easy fixes. But so that meant that when I set up the Tabletop Simulator server, it crashed and it wiped the game. So
yeah, sure did.
We picked it up, we tried it again. That one crashed, it wiped the game. We said, okay, this is getting a little ridiculous. My friend, you take the server. That way, when my computer crashes, as it inevitably will, it won't wipe the game for both of us. And that's fine. We played about halfway through the game, and then her power went out. And that wiped the game. So we were somewhere in like the fourth game, the fourth attempt of Gods Love Dinosaurs before we finally got it played. It was fun. Just we have this like weird sense of like deep curse to it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
That is how it goes sometimes. I think.
Well, it's the age that we live in right now, to where everything just takes I mean, you're right. I mean, especially whenever it comes to like TTS or Tabletopia or any of those, everything just takes that much longer and that much more brain space. And so between those two things, you just kind of go, "Whoo!" I'm working on Cole Worley. Him and his brother did Whirligig games, and so they did the second edition of PAX Premier last year, and they're doing the second edition of John Company. And so last night I actually sat through a play test of the second edition of John Company, so I could see how the rules are going to be worked out or whatever. And it was a 2.5 hour game, not because it takes 2.5 hours, but because Tabletop Simulator makes it take 2.5 hours, and plus it was a teaching game. And we started at 8 o'clock, and it was like 11 whenever we were starting to wrap up. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted from this, you know?
We tried Dominations on Tabletopia, and that was about 3 hours.
Oh, man.
The one thing I will say that Tabletop Simulator's got going for it over Tabletopia is I really like that I can scale up the size of pieces when another player isn't paying attention on their turn. And so suddenly they're like, all of their tokens are just like weirdly misshapen. That's been a lot of fun for me. Like you do it just once on a tile in a tile laying game, and suddenly their tiles don't quite fit together, and so they're just like,
"Oh my gosh,
who has done this?"
That's so great.
Like
We have
the
go ahead, go ahead.
oh, just the threshold for pranking has like
Mm-hmm.
really improved with Tabletop Simulator. You can't do it on other games. It really
Yeah.
is just Tabletop Simulator.
We have a start player marker that we use for, say, like starting player, priority deal, any of those stuff whenever we're playing all these games. That is a pyramid with Barack Obama's head on it, and
Sure.
so. And so the front is just like his face, and it's all like wildly distorted, and his hair, and then his ears on the side, and it's the best thing ever because we get to pass Obama around, and typically the person who starts off with Obama wins because
Right.
they have the
It's a
luck of
blessing.
Barack
Yeah.
Obama, right?
Yeah.
And so, but it's just wonderful because of that scaling, right? Because whenever someone's not paying attention, we'll just make Barack just like enormous on the
Right.
table. They're just not paying attention. Like, what is that? Why is
It's
this
super
giant
fun to
ear?
stream as well because you can tell the people watching the stream can see that you're just sort of clicking the scale button as like this like
Mhm.
meeple just starts expanding in size, but it's always someone else is just like, what the? Hilarious.
Oh, it's great.
Probably my favorite thing about online gaming has been that. But oh man.
Good.
But yeah, speaking of games, so the next segment of our show is typically a game that I call Game the Name, which then I get confused because I keep trying to call it Name the Game, then I'll call it Game the Name, Game Name, and then I just end up somewhere like
Sure.
I end up somewhere in the weeds of that regular expression, just kind of looping on itself. I'm like, Game plus, Name plus, too many. But basically, the pitch is I'm going to come up with some name. I have just come up with an idea, and we will back and forth improv a game design about it. Someone will sign it. We'll become millionaires, and we can leave our previous lives behind to go live in luxury forever.
This is the dream. This is the
That's
dream right here.
eventually going to happen. And every day we just work a little bit closer towards it.
I will have this on TTS tomorrow.
Right, that's the ambition. Yeah, and I will make all the pieces too large. That is my commitment.
Excellent.
Actually, I will say before we get there, one thing I did figure out is that a great way to get rid of pieces, if like you know how when you'll play some games they'll have the 5-player pieces and you only need the 2-player game.
Sure.
I select all the pieces, I scale them down as small as I can, and I just throw them into a corner somewhere, and they're just gone. It's great. Can't recommend that enough.
I love it.
Anyway, so here is the game name that we are going to be working on. It is called the Lone Caboose. I figured I'd throw you a bone on the train stuff.
It is. So, the Lone Caboose, first of all, is a solo game.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's a solo route building game, a la Ticket's Ride, right? So you have connections from point A to point B, to point C, et cetera, et cetera. So where is the Lone Caboose? Where is what country? What place is it? What's the locale? That's going to inform a lot of what happens.
I feel like if we're going locale for like the phrasing the Lone Caboose suggests to me a like. Have you ever played Sonora by Pandasaurus? It has like that.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, it has that kind of aesthetic. I'm thinking a similar location for that. So like, kind of like the American West, like deserty sort of thing, because it gives you that. I think that if we both instantly snap to like it's a solo game, I kind of want it to convey like not a sense of melancholy, but like a sense of like. You are by yourself and you're just kind of making your way downtown, as the saying goes, but have some like color to it that makes it a little more vibrant and fun, so it's not like depressing. You know what I mean?
Sure. So would this be? Do you think that? So I can go two ways with this. Do you think it's a roll and write? Do you think it's a dexterity game? Is there a solo dexterity game that could be interesting?
Ooh, I think there are. I mean, I played Catch the Moon solo before, but that's mostly just me trying to use all the ladders.
Sure.
There have to be. I mean, there are definitely solo dexterity games, but that's interesting. So it could be. Oh, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. So keep the route building, add the dexterity element, have it be a solo route building dexterity game, which is that you are trying to build a path for the Lone Caboose as it travels from place to place, and you have to kind of just because it doesn't have an engine to carry it forward, right? So the narrative of it is that each town, they just give it a big old push, and they have to get it to the next town.
Yeah.
I'm liking this.
And to make it more interesting, it's a pick up and deliver game, right? So you go to a town, you stack whatever goods you have to transport, but then you have to transport them with a carefully placed flick or nudge, and then it could be that there are that there are cards or something that designates between cities the number of pushes that you can give to get between the two individual cities, right? And then there are other things that you can cross off, like, oh, hey, I have like special powers, right? You get this get a bonus, an extra push this time, so you actually get 4 pushes instead of 3 to try and make it from this city to this city, and then you still have to do it without all of your goods falling off of the top of your caboose.
I actually am really into this so far. So basically, like the closer the city is to you, the lower you'll score because it's easier to gauge how much you need to push it. Right?
Easy.
And at a certain point, the townsfolk are like, why are we putting all of our effort into this small caboose when we could just walk it over to the next town if it's that close? Whereas if you're shooting far away, they're like, it's anyone's guess. We're going to call our insurance company and be like, hello, insurance company, it's 1920. They're going to be like, that's a real thing. I don't know anything about transit. I think that could work. So I think that the real kicker for me is going to be get like Jordan Draper or someone who's dealt a lot with component types and have your components be different densities. So if you want to do it easy, you can just have everything be cubes and different density cubes. Like the higher density cubes are worth fewer points because they are more likely to stay in place. If you want it to be wild, you can have things where it's like different shaped objects and the shapes have different densities as well. So like obviously the to quote Clue, the lead pipe is a different density than like the rope, but having a stack of things that are all different densities may be like an interesting maneuver as you try to like guide this little caboose and flick it towards its next destination.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I think that's great. Well, and then you also need somebody that's going to be able to make a caboose that actually has wheels. Because if it doesn't have wheels, then this is just hot garbage and it's not going to go anywhere, However, the wheels, because I'm thinking the wheels, but they have to be like old, rusty, like super hard to move. Yeah, I'm not talking about it needs to be a Hot Wheels car. I'm talking about like it just needs to. It can't just be flat surface on flat surface a little bit. Could be. But still, like a little bit of give could be fun because then there's something interesting about what happens if you overshoot the town, or I don't know.
It kind of reminds me of did you ever play Turbo Drift? It was a button shy game. I think Rob Kramer, I want to say. Yeah. So I'm thinking kind of like that's how you set up your you set up basically different locations with cards, and then you can what I was thinking. Choose your distance between where you want to go. So if you have the wheels. The wheels are interesting because then you also have the idea of like, how does the lone caboose stop? And you're like, go with God, little buddy, and you flick it and it kind of careens off the edge. And you're like,
the Hot Wheels will be the $30 upgrade on the Kickstarter.
Right. Absolutely.
Easily. Otherwise it's just going to be whatever spare coaster you have laying around.
If we're not worried about any sort of copyright weirdness, we can also include as a like stretch goal a little sign that says Eastwood Ravine. So that way, if your train just goes clean off the edge of the table, you can just put the Eastwood Ravine sign next to it, so you can commemorate where your train just completely like. People will be like, of all the movies, you're going Back to the Future 3, and I'm like, yes, that was a good train thing. They did a good thing with the train there.
Well, I mean, then let's just find the IP for it and just make it happen. There have been numerous Back to the Future games out in the last year or so.
That's true.
I don't see what's stopping us. I mean, money. Money's
money. Yeah, they don't. Yeah, money and taste. I don't know. The second one, I don't. I've never been burdened by the second one, so why bother? But
love it.
Yeah, no, I think this has got some pretty good legs. I could see it, especially because if we're thinking about the Kickstarter space, this is also where that kind of thing benefits, right? You have a game with weird components, a game that you'd like see in the store and be like, a one-player game, a one-player game with a weird train car. You just smack this train around your table and it goes off the table most of the time. What is this? Some other game that's maybe about building roller coasters that didn't quite work 100% of the way? Who knows? We're not going to talk about that.
I love it. I think this is great. Well done, sir. Well done.
Yes. So so if you're watching and you really want to, spend some money on cultivating a brilliant idea, Lone Caboose, Travis and Eric, hit us up. We would both love to, just really give this game the love that it deserves.
I'm on board. Let's do it.
Cool. Well, I'm kind of into that. I feel like the dexterity route building element is the real nice combo there. Like it works really well with the idea. I like games where there's a strong narrative component to it, and the idea of a bunch of people in town just being like, well, the train can't power itself, so I guess we just push it hard enough, and then push it goes downhill. And you're like in the rule book, you just put parentheses like this. The towns have no idea how trains work, and so they're just like.
They're just shoving it. Well, it's because because the amount of goods on there is just so much.
Right.
You can't you can't care.
The idea of a whole Western town joining hands together and saying we're gonna push this train hard enough that it will just kind of coast to the next one.
I love it.
Yeah,
you're hired. I don't know when we're making this, but
we've done it.
You're done.
Excellent. So I do have additional questions for you. The first one, speaking of games and gaming in general, is I talked a little bit earlier in the episode about the ideal game space or the ideal office space, and one thing that I mentioned was having this sort of the board game classic ideal of being able to sit in front of a 5x5 Kallax unit with some games behind you. And so I noticed as soon as we hopped on the call that you are currently living my dream. But what would you say goes into your ideal game space versus the game space that you have because of practical concerns like money or taste?
Sure. Yeah, we moved into a new house about a year and a half ago, and we have a large space that's right next to this that it was originally supposed to be an office. We decided to not make it. So we were building a house, is what it is, right? So we had the option of updating and changing things however we wanted to. The original space was supposed to be an office, supposed to be closed in, all of that stuff. And so instead, we decided, why don't we open it up, and then it can serve a couple of purposes. It's just kind of like it's a longer, wide room that we got a large table for. Both of us have real small families, and so we normally all come together for Thanksgiving, except this year. Right. But we normally all come together for Thanksgiving, and we wanted to have a space that everybody could sit around the table. So we got a large table. We got one custom ordered, custom made, and we got it installed over there. The best part about it is that Thanksgiving and Christmas and those types of holidays only happen a couple times a year. So the other 360 so odd days of the year, that's my gaming table is what it is. So it's nice because it's right there, right next door to where all the board games are. There's a library over there. We have a lot of shelves with just a bunch of books. My wife's a librarian, right? And so we always have to have books on display. So that's right next door. But it's great. It's a great space. I like to have music sometimes if it works out. So I have a nice little speaker over there. I've started at I was thinking about the board game tables, the custom table, that'd be super cool. But I was like, that's a whole lot of money. And I was like, maybe not so much. So Chad Deshawn from Board Game Tables did a Kickstarter for the inset player, the inset mats for your table. And so I got one of those, and it covers the entirety of my table minus 6 inches on both sides. So it's actually it's perfect. It's perfect because it's drinks, all that stuff on the side, and then this massive gaming space all right in the middle. I was thrilled whenever that came out on Kickstarter, and I was like, I was like, those measurements sound familiar. And so I just get my tape measure and I go over to my table and I'm like, oh, this is great. The only thing is that it's not an enclosed space. It actually opens out to a hallway, which opens out to our living room. So I know like we can get loud sometimes, or I know that
No.
Yeah, so we can get loud sometimes, especially when we're playing something like Tomato or something.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
glad to know that that you and I, the co-presidents of the Tomato fan club.
It's still right over there. It's off screen. It's off screen.
I have been threatened with violence for how much I enjoy that game relative to my friends who do not.
Sure. They only put up with it is really all it is. But
they barely tolerate me, that game.
They're like, why are we doing this? I'm like, because we need 5 minutes to fill, and dinner's going to be ready in 10.
Because I shuffled potato into the top of the deck, and it's just going to mess with people.
It's just going to mess everything up. Oh, I love it. But yeah, so I mean, it's gaming space. I'm just glad to have one. I mean,
Right.
This sounds, in the grand scheme of things, I'm just glad to have one. We didn't have a dedicated gaming space at our old house. It was just kind of a weird flex space that had like a 6-foot folding table in the middle of it, and it was nice because it was in the back of the house, but like, there was nothing neat or fancy about it. And so this is just like anything is an upgrade. There's great lighting in there. So I'm like, okay, done. This is what I want to do. So
yeah, lighting is really underrated. That's the problem I have with one of two problems I have with my current gaming space, just that it's my dining room table. So I guess 3 problems. One is that it's the dining room table. 2 is the lighting is all very warm overhead, like recessed can lights. And so any game you just get like terrible glare. Mm-hmm. And the third one is that, and this one's weird and kind of petty, the table is maybe 6 inches too narrow. If it were like 6 inches wider, it would be the perfect length and width. But right now, it's like if you play Everdell or something on that table, you can fit the board on there, but nothing else. And so you have to make sure that all players are sitting far away from it. So maybe even 8 inches wider would be like a real upgrade for us.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the nice things about being able to do our own table is that we actually got like a couple of cardboard boxes and unfolded them, flattened them out, and laid them down on the ground and got chairs and sit next to it, and we sat down in the chairs, we pushed them out from the tables, we measure everything out.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, and so we're like, okay, this, because we could measure, and I could go, ideally I would want the table to be this long and this wide, which is nice because coming from, once again, like a 30-inch by 6-foot folding table that folded, right? So it always had that little bump right in the middle. It was like, okay, I need to do something better than this, right? And so it's like, big, fancy, nice table. Yes, this is perfect. So
that is perfect.
But that's what we did, right? So we were able to measure it and go, okay, I was like, honey, I need this to be wider for that exact same reason. Because I would be like, get stuff on there. Okay, you're off to the side of the board. You're not in front of it. And so we're like, no, right. I'm not going to let that be a thing. We're going to be able to sit across from each other and make it happen. It's good.
That sounds great.
It's the dream is what it is.
Yeah. One day I'll get there. So, speaking on the topic of gaming more generally, as far as the industry goes, you've been many things, podcaster, editor, designer, or publisher via Presspot. Which of these hats do you most enjoy wearing, and how would you say that each informs the other?
Oh, goodness. So they've all just kind of happened in different stages of life, right? And so 7 years ago, I was just a fan of board games. 6 years ago, I decided to co-host a podcast. And 3 years ago, I decided, hey, rulebook editing is a thing that I could do. I was my good friend Paul Grogan, he reached out to me. I reached out to him at one point and I said, hey, if you need help, eyes on something. This is like 2015. I was like, if you need eyes on something for rulebooks, let me know. And then he was like, okay, I got this project. I just need a couple sets of eyes on it. And it was The Gallerist. And I'm like, okay.
Just like a small thing.
Yeah, small one, right? But that was the very first one that I worked on, and it was like, well, okay now, right? And so I started working on that one, and then after a couple years of Paul's tutelage, I branched off and started just kind of working on my own. And only about a year ago, after low player count dissolved, Donnie, one of the co-hosts, he's talk about a person who has an eye for rules and just can find like those weird loopholes in games. He was always the games teacher, and so I was like, hey, do you want to come on and partner with me? And now the two of us, we just kind of do all the stuff back and forth. So we did that, and then a couple years later, I decided, hey, I need to. I wanna make this RPG for Zine Quest, which is a campaign from Kickstarter to get RPG zines out. And so I had this idea for a weird game about building empathy for refugees, and it was called Reunification. And so I designed that, and I was like, well, I mean, if I'm going to do it, I need to have like a publishing something, right? And so I am a massive coffee fan. And so press pot is another term for French press. And I thought, hey, let's make press pot games, right? And so it's interesting because everything does kind of build into one another, right? It's funny to be like back in front of a microphone, in front of a camera doing this stuff, because like whenever I started with podcasting, I mean, like we were the only people, us and One Player Podcast were the only ones that were doing like solo content. And I got to interview and talk to a lot of really interesting people and publishers and designers. And so I got a lot of insight. Building those connections or having those connections, those relationships with those people, what made it easier for whenever I decided to start doing rulebook editing. And then it ended up being that like I would work with, say, Tom and Mary from Hollandspiel. I would interview Tom, and then Tom and Mary would say, hey, do you want to work on this rulebook for us? And I went, yeah, sure, let's do it. I would interview Jordan Draper, and Jordan would go, hey, let's work on this rule, and just like that stuff would just kind of happen. Natural extension. And so through that, after learning a lot, I built a ton of connections with people. And so being able to go and just do kind of like weird indie design stuff that I wanted to do through Presspot and just kind of like my own stuff was super crucial, because it also showed me other ways that designers worked with stuff, ways that publishers got resources. Where do you order your wooden cubes from? Where do you go to make your cards? And I was able to talk to those people through those connections that I made. And then on top of that and beyond that, it really showed me stuff that I liked and stuff that I didn't like. Being able to interview all these people about games that I may or may not have been interested in, ended up at the end of things going, okay, maybe I can design stuff, but I'm not going to design a Euro game, because while I like playing them, a lot of people are designing Euro games, and maybe that's not the thing that I want to focus my time on. So I like to be a little off center, and so I figured, why not do role-playing games in zine format and go on from there, And so it's funny to see, because I never started off and didn't want to be a designer. I still really struggle and hesitate using the term designer whenever it comes to me, because even like I even struggle with that with
me looking at all the games you designed. Yes,
I know. Well, it's hard because like even as an editor, like at this point I've edited over I think I'm right about 125 games, and I mean and I know I'm talking about big companies, right? I've edited stuff for Renegade. I've edited stuff for Capstone. I've edited stuff for Jordan Draper. I've edited lots of big titles, but I still struggle to call myself a rulebook editor. Just like I still struggle to call myself a game designer, even though I know I design games. It's just because I don't go the traditional route. I'm gonna design this game, and then I'm going to come up with a sell sheet, and I'm going to pitch it to some publisher and hope that they pick it up. I don't. Everything I've done is all through connections that I've made, which is nice for me because I don't like to have to sell myself on stuff. That's just not my personality. And then beyond that, it's just nice because it's you want to pick up this game and you want to publish it? Thanks. How can we make that work? It makes it easier for me. Mhm.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, that is definitely a challenge with just like getting games designed. It's just even also being in the right place to pitch something, or like sometimes it's that you happened to be at the right con, in the right room at the right time, and someone saw it and they're like, "This is the thing I want to sign."
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I mean, I do very little design work, so I'm very much just like, "Ugh," but I hear you.
It's intimidating. It
Oh yeah.
really is. And I think that's why I continue to do the stuff that I do. And the
Mhm.
way that I do it is because I don't feel as intimidated whenever I'm kickstarting a 32-page RPG.
Mhm.
They're that kind of that I have
It's
more
on your
free.
terms, right?
Yeah, 100% it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Cool, cool, cool. Well, similarly, outside of the board gaming sphere, you've done a lot of work in the educational space. And just casually, anecdotally, I've also noticed that a lot of folks in the board game industry have education backgrounds in one way or another. Do you have any thoughts on why that is, or what the industry can learn from education educators?
Oh man, in terms of why why there are a lot of educators in board games. I'm not sure. I think it's like that with any industry, right? And so you have, I see a lot of like computer science people and engineers in board gaming. Those are the people that I see, or right, right. And
I
so
do both hats, so.
but I see that, and then but there are a lot of educators. I think we're just louder. Is really all it is. I'm not sure. Um, but in terms of crossover, um, goodness. I mean, the rules editor in me goes, well, how to teach a game, how to properly format things, how to properly lay out materials and information. Um, and it's strange because like I think I have to think of this as a gamer, but then I also automatically think of this in the industry standpoint. And I'm
Mhm.
like, as an industry, I'm not sure. I mean, there's a lot because it's rulebook editing, it's publishing. There are, this sounds bad, ways to just generally interact with people. One of the big things that I take away from education, more than anything else, is that oftentimes educators have issues because they treat students, and I'm going to not stand on a soapbox for too long. Oftentimes, educators treat students as grades. They treat students as vehicles for whatever evaluation that they're going to have to go through from some administrator that does a walkthrough in their classroom.
Mhm.
Or they look at students in one of these capacities. You're a grade, you are my accountability, you're my evaluation, you're this or that, whatever. And not often enough do educators look at students as people. And that's the most important thing for me, is that I work with students adjacent from the classroom. And so I have to look at them like I help kids sign up for financial aid, right? So
Mhm.
kids come to me with their parents' tax information, and I
Right.
see the poverty level of the kids that I work with. To give you an idea, out of the 2,600 students at my school, over 78% of them are at or below the poverty level. And so I get wonderful, beautiful interactions with all these people that have very interesting.
Ooh. Hmm.
Uh, uh,
Okay. Can I get
living
you
at
to
their
Sorry about this. Can I get you to rewind?
yeah.
I got to students and poverty line, and then I get to have these, and then your internet kind of shook up for a
Oh,
second.
sorry about that. Okay.
That's fine.
So I get so our school, out of the 2,600 students at our school, 78% of them are at or below the poverty level. And so because of that, we have I get to see the extreme poverty that some of our kids have. But I also get to see like the complex issues that are happening in their homes, because they come to me as like one of the people that gets them into college or trade
Mhm.
school, whatever it is, and just typically helps them graduate a lot of times. They go, "Hey, Mr. Hill, what can I do with blank?" Or they go, "Hey, my parents can't pay for college. Where can I go?" And then I have to navigate those conversations with them.
Mhm.
Um, I think a lot of that really does kind of transition over into board gaming. And where I see that more than anything else is through empathy, is the way that we are inclusive and the people that we're able to bring to the table, in the sense of how we interact with people who have wildly different backgrounds than us, wildly different perspectives, and just being able to put ourselves in their shoes, sure, but more importantly, just see where they're coming from. And like whenever a kid is like, "Hey, I want to go to like this school that costs $45,000 a year, but my parents don't even together make $45,000 a year. How can I make that happen?" And part of my goal is to get those kids who are often first generation kids out of that cycle of poverty and get them into an education system that is not going to cost them loans for 20 or 30 years, right? And being able to see them from that perspective. In board gaming, a lot of it for me is I want to make sure that the stuff that I create falls within that narrative, right? Reunification is an RPG that I made a couple years ago, and it's about a family who had been separated from a civil war, who is finally reuniting. The Civil War, the two leaders had called for peace, and they were being reunited, is what happened. A lot of this actually came from conversations that I had had with students. I had a couple of students who were African refugees. They came from Nigeria, and they saw from their families in neighboring countries the political struggles that had been happening, and they had talked about where they had fled or where their family members had fled to escape some of that chaos and some of that political turmoil that was happening. And I talked to them about this. I was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think about it?" And they gave me all sorts of ideas to use, and you kind of use them a little bit as a sensitivity reader of, what do you think about this? Am I being wildly whatever? But it was abstract enough that through role playing, it's not weird, I'm going through that. But being able to bring in those really interesting conversations, that's so crucial. And being able to put yourself in the position of, where are you coming from? Why are you cranky? Why I've been teaching you these rules for 45 minutes. What's going on? If someone's having a bad day, let's talk about it some more. And so there's so much that I know I personally have learned in education that I feel that's coming out through the way I interact with people in the board game world already.
Yeah, the empathy thing is a really underrated point. Like one of the biggest empathy fixes we made in my own gaming is that we just basically created a no fault ejection pathway for games. So basically, if you're before a game starts, instead of saying "Hey, are we all ready?" I ask everybody "Are you excited to play this game?" And if they say no, then I'm like, "Okay, then let's find something else."
Cool.
And if they're like, "Well, I don't want to," it's like, no. I don't want you to have a bad time. So if this is not going to ensure that you're going to have a good time, then we should find something that is more suitable to how you're feeling right now. This is mostly informed by a game of Betrayal that we played a very long time ago, where it's basically I made a mistake there, and I asked everybody how are we feeling about this game? One person was like, eh, and I was like, that's fine. It's Betrayal. It won't take that long. Which is basically famous last words whenever it comes to Betrayal: House on the Hill, because that's always the game that takes 3 hours. As soon as you're like, this is going to be a short one, it's a 3-hour game. And so a miserable time was had, and we were like, we need to sit down, we need to approach this with empathy, and we need to figure out what we can do better for next time. And the key fix there is just making sure that people, if you're not enthusiastic about playing a game, we just don't start it. And that's also led to some nice ways for me to examine my own feelings when I'm at a game night. So I have a friend that I visit very often for games, and she is superb. She plays a bunch of games. We play a bunch of games together. Not every game that she plays is necessarily within my wheelhouse, but I bring my laptop for that. And so if they're like, oh, we want to play this, 2-hour crunchy Euro, I'm like, oh, I'm actually just going to write. And there was originally this intention where it was like, oh, wait, are you sure we can play a different game? I was like, no. I'm offering to sit out because I want you all to be able to play this. I don't want to play it, and I don't want to bring down you all who clearly do want to play it. Writing for me is fine because it means that I can sit in the game and heckle, which is just as fun as playing sometimes.
Sure is.
You'll occasionally just whisper, I think you need to add more Euro, like trade more Renaissance, the merchant gems, Venice. And then people are just impressed by the profundity of what I'm saying, just the gifts that I spew. But those have both been like, I really do think that the connection between like working as an educator and developing empathy for a wide range of people has, of course, a broad range of applications, but it's also good to think about how to apply that empathy to your own like personal spheres, your own social spheres, and your own gaming spheres, because it will just lead to better outcomes.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, that's great. No, so speaking of some of the games that you've worked on, you really cover the two main kinds of games in existence. So you cover indie RPGs and train games. Those are both the types of games. But what drew you to those two genres?
Sure. So whenever Kickstarter ran Zine Quest for the first time back in 2019, there was about a 6-month lead up into it, and a Twitter colleague of mine, Matthew Gravelin, he has always been a really kind supporter of just like whatever random stuff that I've done. And Zine Quest was announced by Kickstarter, and they said, hey, sometime in the next 6 months, we're going to run this campaign for a month. And we want people to create these things. And so I had this idea for reunification, but it originally started as an 18-card game that I wanted to pitch to Button Shy, which is just super,
as most games do.
right. Well, they had just signed on Penny Rails, and so I was like, well, yeah, let's do it. Let's get another game in there. And then obviously it through thinking about it over a couple months, it morphed far beyond that, and I was like, okay, this isn't going to work. But then whenever Zine Quest happened, I thought, okay, let's tinker with this. I don't come from an RPG background. I have never played Dungeons and Dragons. I really haven't played anything up until just a couple of years ago. That is whenever I started like, oh, this is interesting. And so because of Zine Quest and because of people that Matthew had introduced me to, I started finding more interesting game designers, RPG designers, and I kind of started like seeing what kind of cool stuff they were doing, and I went, okay, this is way out of the box.
Oh yeah, the indie RPG space is wild.
It is, right? And whatever
one thing that's just been like tough is when you talk to people about RPGs, they're very much like, yes, there are 3 RPGs. There's D&D 3.5. There's Pathfinder, and there's D&D like 5e. And you're like,
sure,
yes, those are fun. We love them. Please just come immerse yourself fully into the indie RPG space, because there's stuff like I can't even come up with good examples. There's just if you can think of it, there's probably an indie RPG about it, and it's wonderful.
There is like Visigoths versus Morgoths from Lucian Kahn, right? And so it's just there's so much weird stuff out there, but because of it, it's so open and it's so welcoming. And so because of that, I thought, well, I can do some of this stuff. Like I have a background in curriculum. I have a background in gaming. I know a lot of this stuff. So why not just tinker with game design? And it came out being okay. I was like, okay, well, this is pretty cool. And then because of that, I continued seeing what other people were doing. And I joined, and I was able to finally join like itch.io, and I was like, okay, let's see all the stuff. Oh, there are game jams that are happening. You mean people can, like, there's a thing that's open for a month that I could write a game design for. Okay, let's do it, And so because of that, that helped kind of refine some of those processes early on. And then through there, a lot of it has really just kind of been informed by my own personal experiences, weird stuff that I've done, honestly, traumatic experiences in my life. A lot of stuff has come from that. And then also, how can I break that barrier of what is too personal in an RPG setting, because it feels like people like kind of those really off-center indie RPGs, they get kind of weird, but they never get personal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just felt, no, let's get personal about things. I want things to be experiences that people are able to engage with, and I don't necessarily want them to just be let's do this thing, let's roll on this table and see what happens. I want you to journal. I want you to write. I want you to think. I want you to feel what's going on. And so that was all indie RPGs. On the entirely opposite end of the spectrum are economic train games, right? So these Cube Rails games of like Irish Gauge and Ride the Rails, Trans-Siberian, Paris Connection, Chicago Express, those types of games. I'm really drawn to those as well. That's this whole section over here is just all train games.
Right.
And it's because it's something that I love. I love shared incentives. I love like this kind of like fake cooperation that you kind of have to work together, and you got to make sure, like, am I going to take this move, and I'm going to take this action? Is it going to be better for me or better for you? Are you going to make more money? I don't know. All these games are typically like 45 to 75 minutes. And they're just interesting kind of things to play with. The other thing, especially with like Cube Rails titles specifically, is that there's a base foundation of what the game is, right? So you got some hexes on a board, you got some train companies, you got some shares in these train companies, you got a build track, you got to auction off a share, you got to increase the value of stuff. That's what you got going, right? So, so that's what it is. Now, all of them have different twists on the design structure, is what it is.
Much like the curve of a railroad. I'm active listening.
but it's true. So have you played Irish Gauge?
No, I have basically.
Okay.
Closest I've come to a train game. I was originally about to say Ticket to Ride and embarrass myself, but the closest I've come to a train game is probably Railroad Rivals.
Okay, sure. So what it's adjacent, and that's perfectly fine. The interesting thing with Cube Rails games is that every single one is has a twist into how the game happens, right? So there's some mechanical twist, right? So with Irish Gauge, one of the big things that Tom did is the dividends that get paid out whenever you make money for your shares, you actually draw blindly out of a bag. And train gamers were just like losing their minds. So like, no. I have to be able to math this out. Yeah, I have to be able to math this out. And Tom's like, no. This is what's going to happen, and you're going to put this, and you're just going to draw them out there. So Tom, she made it that way, and people were losing their minds. But that was the twist with Irish Gauge, and everybody and all these other Cube Rails titles, they all change up just a little bit here and there. And so it was nice because for me, it was, here's your foundation, here's your base. What kind of stuff can Travis do to put on top of it to make it different? And then also with kind of that game group that I've been able to be with on Monday nights has helped significantly, because they're all just the sweetest people ever. And they go, sure, Travis, we'll play test your game. And so it makes it really easy to like pump out a bunch of designs and just sit there and go, okay, this is garbage. Or they'll go, okay, no, this is actually halfway decent. What can we do to make it better?
Oh, yeah, I always laugh just because I am notorious in my game night circles now for a very polite tyranny. Which is essentially like, since I have so many games that I have to review these days, right? I just will show up with a bag of games, and I'm like, we're playing one of these. And they're like, but what about? And I'm like, we're playing one of these. I'm so sorry. It's not ideal, but it is unfortunately the way that a lot of things have been going down. So speaking of, I do like the idea of the train game genre being a like vaunted genre with rules that people then just commit sins against on a regular basis. Like they're just sort of like, yes, allow me to blaspheme against like the first rule of train games or the second rule of train games, just kind of see what happens in that space. That's very interesting to me. But I do know basically nothing about train games, so I'm aware that they take place in a variety of locations, and I am aware they usually involve a train of some kind. That's
typically
most of it. But what makes a location sort of good for a train game? Are we talking more about the historical aspects of, like, trains were once here? Are we talking about the geography of it? Is it sort of a ticket to ride rails to sales where you can just slap down train routes wherever you feel like and then say, but these trains are also boats, and somewhere someone's like, what? Like, the train on the boat rail, and then you just kind of lose the thread of that, much like I've lost the thread of this question? Question mark?
So I think it is a little bit of geography and it is a little bit of history. So I know for me personally, and so to take a couple steps back, the other interesting thing about cube rails is that there aren't a lot of designers. Like there are actively about 4 designers that are actually making cube rails titles. And so that's kind of the other neat thing, is that it's a niche space that nobody's really tinkering with right now. You know, everybody's kind of gone, well, that's gone away, but then like Capstone is reprinting them, Rio Grande is reprinting them, Hollandspiel is putting out games. And so because of that, you can see like there's a little bit of a wave of, okay, maybe this is coming back a smidge, right? So I've spoken to a couple of those designers, and I know for them and for me, a lot of it does start with history. I've actually just kind of very recently started working on a design for Long Island, and it's the Long Island Railroad. And it's interesting because Long Island is not a large space. Whenever I looked at it, all trains, there are only 4 train lines, and they all originated in the northwest portion, and they were predominantly used to ferry, like passengers were ferried over, they were picked up there, and then they went out. But there were only 4 lines. 3 of them barely made it halfway into the island, and only one of them made it all the way to the opposite, to the fork at the end of the northeast part of Long Island. And so because of that, I talk about all this stuff on Twitter all the time, but I was thinking, I wonder what place has a weird rail history. And I think of locations, and I think of like weird, interesting geographic locations. And I was like, I wonder about Long Island. That's kind of like a weird place to think about. And I look at it and I go, holy moly, that's weird. Like that's small. And they had 4 rail lines on that island. And I don't know how large Long Island actually is, but you know, from giant states as ours, everything is tiny.
Right.
And so Long Island, it's itty bitty, right? You know, we can drive double digits of hours in our states and still be in our state. You know, not Long Island, right? And so, but I was like, man, that's so wild because there are only 4 train lines and like 3 of them totally petered out. What kind of fun thing can I do with it? And then that's where it starts. And sometimes that wholly just doesn't work whatsoever. Sometimes it works out great. But you know, that's where a lot of it starts. Tom, I've talked about Tom Hall. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, can I pitch to you then 2 weird train ideas that I've been just like mulling about while you've been having this? Hold on,
let me write it down. I'm ready.
Okay. So, what are your thoughts on the Disneyland monorail?
Oh, I think it's neat. That would definitely be just like a straight up pick up and deliver.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So my initial thought with the monorail, the issue with it is that you're not actually building track, right?
Sure.
The issue is that it's just there. Now, I could see this as like a fun free print and play, you know, that you have the layout of Disneyland and you have to pitch it to Walt and everybody else and say, okay, this has got to go from here to here. What's the most not the shortest route, but what's the route that will show more of the park?
Right.
So
exactly.
I think that could be. I think that
you think about the location appeal as you're curving the monorail. You think about hotel locations. You think about the idea that like maybe I just want to ride the monorail. I don't actually want to stay in any of the hotels, but I need to get from this park to this park. Oh, this company has come over and they're like, oh, we want to expand the park over here. Now what are you going to do with monorail stops? Do you add? Do you pivot? So that was just one thing I was sitting there. I was like, weird trains. Now, the weirdest train of all, if I may, so I grew up in a small town in West Virginia,
Okay.
About 30 miles north of us is a larger town called Morgantown, the home of West Virginia University. West Virginia University has a system called the PRT, or Personal Rapid Transit, which is, I
Okay.
think, one of the only systems of its kind in the world. It is essentially, I think, a like electric powered, small scale, like 4-person car monorail that travels through a
Mm,
variety of stops all over the city with different stations, different transits, multiple levels, like all these cars just shooting around town
huh.
constantly.
That's
It
interesting.
is a, it has a weird history. It is a weird conceit, and as the university expands, it has to deal with the fact that they like built this system in, I really want to say, the mid 50s or something, and it
Mm.
still kind of works. The running joke is always that it kind of breaks down constantly because it is
Sure.
ancient. But just the idea of like this small scale, like student level train that's servicing a maybe like multiple tens of thousands
Hmm.
student university that has now sprawled over this entire city. Just kind of, when you were talking about trains with interesting histories, I was like, oh, this kind of stands out to me as something that I remember as
That is
like,
neat.
oh, what a weird hot thing, because there's no air conditioning, because again, it was built a long time ago. But like
Sure.
the idea of how you manage this like small scale train that's sprawled over this decently sized
Hmm.
city.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll send you more information about it just because it's fun to read
Oh,
about. Just
totally,
like a
totally.
what a weird concept for someone to be like, yes, what we'll do is we'll build a small personal train system inside of Morgantown, West Virginia.
That's so wild.
It is. It's I believe one of the only ones of its kind. If I had more information at my like fingertips, I could probably come up with a better explanation for it. But I remember reading that like some country like sent like people to Morgantown to research this train system because they wanted to build a similar thing in their country,
Hmm.
which is wild to me because you never like, with all of my love to West Virginia, you never really think about West Virginia sort of pioneering things in the like technical space.
Sure.
It's wild.
That's
Like
cool.
I love West
That's
Virginia.
super
It's
cool
got like,
though.
yeah, it's definitely, when we talk about like weird trains, like I was like, Disneyland Monorail is odd, yes, but the PRT in Morgantown, West Virginia is like strange and unique.
Let's see. Yeah, send me info. I'd love to
Yeah.
see more about that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll read more about it. I'll pass it your way. It's a fun thing. So when we're talking a lot about games, you've also talked about different players in the space, different companies in the space, and I mean even just external to gaming. Do you have any folks that you sort of wish you could collaborate on a game design with, given the opportunity? So in gaming, out of gaming, doesn't matter. Like,
Um, I would love to collaborate with Tom Russell from Hollandspiel. Tom's designed oodles of war games, um, oodles of train games. I would absolutely love to collaborate with Tom. Just super cool, really interesting ideas. She is not afraid to take great risks. She designed The Vote and This Guilty Land, and was very unabashedly one-sided. This is a game against, oppression, and just really, really interesting game design prospects. I would love to work with the people from Thorny Games.
yeah,
Dialect,
cool.
um,
Dialect is, oof.
right. Dialect, Sign, Xenolanguage is the one that I think is just about to wrap up on Kickstarter, has just recently wrapped up on Kickstarter. About it's kind of based off of The Arrival,
Mhm.
right? Ted Chiang's The Arrival, and yeah, I would love that. Part of me would love to work with Avery Alder. She designed The Quiet Year, and
Mhm.
that was kind of my first entry into this world of game design, of RPGs, and just kind of strange, unique indie creations. I would love to work with her on stuff. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're just I could kind of open up Twitter and just scroll through people and go like, that would be super cool to work with Banana. It would be super cool to work
Yeah.
with just kind of whoever. And so
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, there are some people that probably I would want to work more with, obviously on very specific, very specific types of games. But
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think Dialect is the only game that I would put at the tier of I was emotionally devastated by this game.
Oh my gosh. Have you played Sign?
I have not.
Have you heard, do you know about it?
I'm familiar with Sign. I
Oh
haven't
my
played it though.
gosh. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. That game is just is so wild. And beautiful.
We achieved a like beautiful character tension in Dialect where I had to do something that was perfectly in character for my character, but just saying it caused me to like immediately like freeze up and apologize out of character, and I was just like and we had a like quick like we're good, but I was just like, oof. We played it. Every single one of us died horribly. Can't recommend it enough.
It's so great. I love it.
Yeah, Dialect is probably the first like RPG game that I played in the space that made me really think like, oh wow, there's something different happening here than a lot of the games that I've played before. Just because like I love board gaming. Very few board games sit with me after I've finished. There are some, but like I'd say probably maybe one of them is like Soul: Last Days of a Star.
Oh yeah, that's so good.
I love that game so much, and I'm just like, but that one maybe like Spear Island, like a few games in that sense.
Sure.
But Dialect, I just remember like it's been years since I've played it. I played it once, loved it, got it immediately. Haven't quite ever had the right chance to bust it out, just because I feel like I need a group who is ready for that.
Yes.
And my RPG group is almost always 6 people. So I'm always like, well, like I would watch if you all wanted to play. It's
well,
where I'm at.
Well, if our goal this past year, which obviously didn't happen, but our goal this past year at BGGCon was to actually, Donnie and I were going to get people together and set aside an entire day of the con, an entire room, and play Sign and Dialect and Quiet Ear and just kind of go through some of these like big emotional whatever. And so if BGGCon ever becomes a thing again, you are welcome to pop in for a game or two, or all day, of course, if you want. But you're always welcome to come in for a game or two and partake.
My last BGGCon was kind of wild. I spent about half of it just sitting in the hot games room looking at the crew, but not playing it. Just sort of like looking directly at the table, being like, oh, I know we're playing this game, but what if instead of this game we played the crew instead? Could we do that? And they're like, my group was like, well, we're kind of playing this game. And I was like, no, I know, but that game is better than this game.
We play that game, sure.
Like, could we just go? And then I played. Have you played T-Rex's Holiday?
No.
It's a roll and write game about what cats do when you're not in the house.
Oh my gosh.
And so it is, I think what it is basically, and it's been a while, so I apologize, full apologies to everyone when I messed the rules up, but basically you roll 3 dice and you hide them, and you choose 2 of those dice to show everyone else, and then everyone writes down their 2 dice, and then you reveal the 3rd one, and everyone writes down the 3rd one as well.
Oh,
and
gosh.
So it's a really interesting subversion of planning, because you're like, which dice are important for me to show to you so that you make a mistake that I can then exploit by showing you this 3rd die.
That's wild.
For a
T-Rex's Holiday?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I believe it's from the Time on Board Game Design group.
Okay.
It's a hoot. I loved it. I really need to find a way to get a copy, and it is on my list of like games that I mentioned. It's also just extremely cute, so it's hard not to want a copy of the game, because it's like there's a whole cat tree area. There's like a bunch of cats riding a train. Which, hey, there we go. We're back on trains.
There it is, and we have a cat.
Yeah, so. It's both things. It's the 2 things that everyone loves: trains and cats.
I love it.
Yeah. No, it was good. I miss BGGCon. I was like, I guess if I am allowed to take away one like weird like monkey's paw highlight of this year is that I was very, very upset that since BGG and PAX were at the same time, I was going to have to choose which one I wanted to go to. And I think for like professional reasons, it really made more sense for me to go to PAX. And so
Sure.
I suppose in a like really messed up way, I am mildly relieved that I didn't have to make that decision.
Oh my
I'm like,
gosh. Yeah.
I'm like, well, I would have liked to have gone to one of them, but I suppose that not getting a choice is better than feeling bad about whichever choice I did make.
Mhm. Yeah.
Is that better? I don't know.
I don't know. It might be.
It's something. Cool. Well, so on the editing side of coming all the way back around to like our, I guess really more your than our, but our being I'm walking us through it. So I'll take some credit. But your pathway through gaming, I know there are a lot of folks getting started with their own game designs that are maybe treating their rule books as more of an oral history than a something that needs to be written down. Do you have any advice for folks who are getting into game design, especially around rules and sort of teaching their games as they prepare to try and convert their idea fully into a game?
Sure. So whenever it comes to rules, and this is always hard because everybody takes this from a different perspective.
Right.
I've learned a lot of this with designing and doing quick prototyping for all these Cube Rails games that I'm making, right? So like RPGs are a very different thing. I'm going to set that aside over here. But when I'm looking at board game stuff specifically, and especially whenever it comes to rules, I mean, this is funny. Whenever I get in Photoshop and I put the maps and everything all up there and get them all together and ready to go, I actually put the rules on the map. It is there. So the game board in and of itself will have all of this blank space around it that I actually use for the rules. And so what I've enjoyed using with Tabletop Simulator is that if something doesn't work, something doesn't work. And I just go back in, I edit it, and I drop it in there and I go. Depending on how complex your game is, because that's where things get, this is where there are all these, conditional aspects. Right. Depending on how difficult your game is, you want to get your rules laid out. You want to get them written down as quickly as you can, but then also knowing and understanding that whole sections of it might potentially change. I'm working on. I started working on the second edition of John Company from Cole Worley and Worley Gig Games, right? And they're they're probably about 70 to 80% through the development cycle of that game, and they just brought me in. And so for me, it's nice because I don't see the massive changes that are happening, but instead I see what's that thing? I played it with Cole last night, and he said, don't look at the rules for the next 2 days. I got to add and remove a bunch of stuff. Now, he'll do it, and then Friday night, I'll look at it and go, okay, this is kind of settled down. Over the weekend, I'll go through the rules again, right? But that's a unique situation because that is a long, complex game that has, like, the Google Doc right now is 26 pages, and it's just text. Yeah. It's not like here are a bunch of images and graphics and giant headings. No, I mean it's just text, right?
That just gave me a little bit of anxiety.
Yeah, sure. But because of that, it's like that has to be laid out now. Those rules have to be written now. But if it's something that's definitely on the lighter side that hey, it's going to change or it's going to whatever, then be okay with it. I also have no problem, and this is stuff that I'm still learning as well as as still a new designer of an actual board game, right? Is that I'm still trying to figure out what are those, like, how personal do I take stuff whenever I get criticism back, and then how much of that actually needs to change in the rules versus, okay, maybe the person just didn't like the game. That's okay. But maybe this is a rules issue that if I do this, and this, it changes and it goes on from there. Then it changes it up some. So I would say take whatever weird amorphous ideas you have, try and congeal them by writing them out, sketch them out, whatever process works better for you. Like Ryan Lockett from Red Raven. I don't know if you've ever heard this, right? But the first thing he designs on a game is he paints the cover of the box. Like, that is his first thought of the game. So, like, above and below, he painted the picture of the cover of the box and then went, how do I make a game out of this? Which I think is just wild.
That
But
is
I
wild.
love it, right? For me, the first few times I did anything board game content, I did any kind of game design stuff, the first thing I did was write out all of the rules.
Mhm.
Now, the problem with that is that I went exactly what you asked. I went, oh, well, but this is how the rule goes. And then I was like, but I've already written the rules. And the rules aren't going to change. It took a while for me to realize, okay, no, Travis, the rules are going to change because they need to change to make the game better. So just hold on to those ideas loosely, hold on to those thoughts and be like, you know what, it's okay. If this needs to be a 2 instead of a 3, do that. If drafting doesn't work, cool. Don't draft. Do something else. Figure out a easier way for setup, whatever it ends up being. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my go-to, the foundational core of my game design has always been, what is the funny thing that I want to happen in this game? And then how do I piece the rest of the game around it to create this scenario, like to let this scenario occur?
Yeah.
Like, I'm mostly just like, how do I get this boat on the water?
Yeah,
and then
I understand.
This is why I don't publish games. It's because I'm just like, well, I have something that works, and it's somewhere between a boat, a train, and a cat. And I'm just like, we'll just push it out onto the water.
See what
and
happens.
It sinks immediately, and I'm just sort of like...
It's perfect.
Excellent. Okay, well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but one last question. So you've had quite the journey through gaming, from playing games to talking about games to editing rules for games to designing games to publishing games. You've kind of done a fair amount of everything. I mean, if you ever want to get into board game art, I feel like that's sort of the next place for you.
I can't. I really can't. I wish I could.
I tell people all the time, the reason I do photography is that I have a really good ability to mentally image things in my brain. Like if you describe a box to me, I can come up with a 3D sort of model of the box in my brain. I can rotate it. I can almost feel the texture of it. This makes any sort of representational art impossible for me, because if I draw, my drawing skill is not good enough to represent the perfect image in my brain out, and I get furious.
Yep.
With photography, I can get the image in my brain, and then it's just a matter of building it. And then once I've got the pieces, I'm like, it's done. We did it. We did it. But that's here to there. But yes. So, do you have any advice that you wish that you had been given before you started your sort of journey through the board game industry?
Oh gosh, this is going to be ironic coming from me. You don't have to do everything, and it's okay. And just because you start doing something doesn't mean that you need to continue doing something. Honestly, we held on low player count about a year after it needed to go. Two-thirds of us had children, and we were in the process of selling our house. We actually moved in with my in-laws for 6 months while our house was being built and old was being sold and all that stuff. And really, we shut down low player count during that time, but we really needed to shut it down beforehand. And it was because just, life gets in the way. We all got busy, stuff occurred, and let's not do this, right? It's okay to say this isn't working as is, especially if you're doing any type of content creation. It's okay to shut down shop, right? I started graduate school this past semester in the fall, and I knew that I needed to slow down my rulebook editing. The hard part is that I knew that that's where I get a lot of money. So I knew I needed to slow down rulebook editing. I knew I was going to take a cut in, extraneous funds that I would get in. So instead, I took a back seat and I had my editing partner Donnie come on and say, "Hey man, do you want to take control of some of the administrative work and the bulk of the stuff that we're doing?" And he went, "Sure." And so we kind of flip-flopped to where I was doing 60 or 70% and he was doing 40 or 30% of the rules, to where now we're flopping and he's hitting all the rules harder and I'm kind of playing cleanup and doing a lot of the minor technical grammatical stuff and bouncing ideas off of him. And so it's great because now he's learning and growing and being able to craft this on his own, while I'm able to kind of take the back seat and let him do most of the work for it. Some exceptions obviously occurred, but for the most part, let him run with it and just kind of empower him and show him, hey, you're really good at this. You should really seriously consider doing this as a side gig, and then kind of just run with it, But then also I know that this isn't going to last forever. I've been doing it now for 5 years. 3 of those I've been freelance, and I'm getting to the point where it's like I need to either need to dive in harder or decide to fully step out. And these next couple of years, me being in grad school, is going to be perfect, because it's going to kind of give me that space of being able to step away from it and go, okay, I'm still going to do this on the side. Donnie's going to take the bulk of it and go on from there. Whenever it comes to game design and publishing, same thing. The only reason that I even have a publishing title underneath anything that I've done is because I wanted to self-publish stuff, right? Because I wanted to do things totally on my own accord, however I want to. I'm going to give an example real quick. Card Rails, this one right here. Card Rails, this is a prototype copy. Card Rails is, no surprise, a Cube Rails game played on cards that is part of Kickstarter's Make 100 campaign in January. And the idea is that you only make 100 copies of a thing, right? So this is not just games, right? People do this for whatever. 100 copies of a book, 100 games. And so Card Rails only has 100 copies out there. That's it. Because I'm doing it the way that I'm doing it, I'm not doing international shipping. I have a print and play option that people can back that way, but that's it. And so I've been getting some flack because I'm not opening it up internationally. I've been getting some flack because there are only 100 copies that are going to be made. But I also have to understand I'm going to be in the middle of grad school, in the middle of going back into the classroom, in Texas, which is a COVID hotspot everywhere. So I have to make sure that I am watching after my own mental health with this. I can get 100 of these. I can put them in boxes. I can bag up cubes, and I'm good to go. No problem. I can do that stuff. I can do 100 of those easy. If I were to open it up, and let's say, and it's hard because people will go, but I mean, you could sell 2, 3, maybe even 400 or 500 copies of this game. And I go, yes, but I also don't want a shipment of 75,000 8mm cubes to my house that I now have to sort over the next 5 months. I'm not going to do it. It will drain me, right? And so I have to know what my boundaries are. And my boundary, and I'm using all this under the sense of Kickstarter's Make 100 campaign, is totally my excuse. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not ever going to reprint this, that I'm not going to make more copies down the road. What it does mean, though, is that I have to watch out for me. And if that means I have to set up those boundaries beforehand, then that's the most important thing. I need to know whenever to call. I need to know whenever to stop things, because I have, how we all are. A lot of creatives are. It's real easy just to continue to dive into new things and go, but what about this? What about this? Oh, that's cool. That's something I could do. I'm smart enough. I'm talented enough. I can make this stuff happen. And then you got to go, wait a second. You're doing too much. Take a break. Drink some water. Read a book. Do something that is not board game related.
Right? I just reflexively drink water whenever someone says it.
Exactly, though. But right, so if anything, the advice that I would have is set up some good boundaries for yourself, and especially if you're getting into anything like this, content creation, publishing, designing, just know whenever enough is enough. And it could be that you need to take a break for your own sake, and you need to prioritize that more than scrolling on Twitter and trying to get that game sold off to the company that you want it to. And I say this out loud to myself as well, because I find myself going, man, you've reached out to me a couple times about this game, but you haven't actually followed up with me. So should I reach back out to you? Do I just say, no, let's take it someplace else? Do I just let it sit, on a prototype tabletop simulator shelf for a few more months and come back. I don't know, right? And so I say this to myself as well of, Travis, take a break.
Yeah, I've been trying a new mantra, which is like, I am a finite being and that is enough. And that has been working for me.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, like I said, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, be on my show. This has been a blast.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it's really fun.
I look forward to when we can hang out again once
Oh my gosh.
things are simpler, hopefully. But anything else you want to plug before we wrap it up?
Goodness,
Or can we find you online?
Yeah, really. I mean, if anything, just the couple places you can find me is on Twitter. That's where I pretty much conduct almost all my business. And you can find me at Travis D. Hill. You can go to the Presspot Games website, which is presspot.games. That has all of my game design and my rulebook editing all in the same place. So you go to presspot.games. One-stop shop, yeah, and it's wild because it's once again it's rulebook editing or it's game design and all that other stuff. Eventually, I might have an online store. I don't know. We'll see. If you're interested in any of the RPGs that I've done, you can go to itch.io and get it there. But that's all linked on the presspot.games website. You can go there, go to games, and find the itch stuff. You could download all those PDFs if you want to, and so that's it.
Awesome. Well, like I said, thanks again so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, Eric, this is way fun. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Well, I'll see you next time.
Well, that's all the time we've got for you tonight. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Late Night Table Talk.